This is the Bringing Business to Retail podcast with today's guest, Richard Chapo.
Welcome to the Bringing Business to Retail podcast on SelenaKnight.com. Stay ahead of the competition by opening your doors to business experts so you can learn, grow, and be inspired. Passionate about bringing business strategies to independent retailers, please welcome your host, Selena Knight.
Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. You probably think that today's episode is all about the GDPR. You have been seeing it everywhere. If you're like me, your inbox has been flooded with people asking you to resubscribe, click a button, updated privacy policies, you name it, you've probably had it in your inbox. And I know we've been doing the same thing. It is important that you become compliant when it comes to this kind of policy. But fear not, today's episode has absolutely nothing to do with the GDPR. This episode is brought to you by my ultimate guide to getting your products into stores. If you have a product, if you're a supplier, a distributor, or a product creator, and you desperately want to see your product stocked on the shelves of retail stores, then this is a must-have for you. It is a free guide with all of my tips and tricks from not only being an award-winning retailer, but I also created several products. So I'm sharing with you from both sides of the fence exactly what you need to get your products into retail stores. Head over to SelenaKnight.com/product and grab the guide for free. Today's guest is Richard Chapo. He's been a lawyer for more than 24 years and he specialises in internet business law. He actually works to position his clients so that they minimise their potential to lawsuits before they happen, which is what we all want. So he advises his clients, whether they're big multinational companies, right through to small bloggers with how they can set themselves up to eliminate potential problem areas before any legal action gets taken. Now, Richard and I have a great conversation today. We could have talked for ages, and I love his laid-back Southern California vibe. And he was able to talk about all this legal stuff in a fun way. You'll hear me laughing in the background. He's given some great examples, and he's given you some information that is genuinely going to change your business. We talk about copyright infringement. We talk about why you should or shouldn't be putting people on your newsletter list and the information that you are and aren't allowed to collect from them and send to them. And we also dig deep into the area that I know that you're going to love, social media influencers, how you can avoid getting your social media pages taken down, the laws that you need to comply with if you're using influencers, and what to do if you are finding that your copyright's being infringed, your text or your images are being used elsewhere, what's fair use. Look, we talk so much about so many things, all in a fun way. I could list them for ages, but instead, let's jump into this episode. Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. Now, the internet has been a godsend for us. It means that we can sell our products and services anywhere in the world. But as it grows, it becomes a legal minefield. So today's guest, Richard Chapo, is an internet lawyer, and he is going to help us navigate just a teeny tiny part of the internet web laws that are out there. We can't cover all of them, but I've asked him to talk about a few of the key ones that are going to be relevant to you no matter where you are in the world. So welcome to the show, Richard.
Thank you for having me on.
Now tell us, how did you get into internet law? It's a very niche thing, and the internet's only been around for, say, 20 years. So how did you choose that field?
I actually started out as a litigation defense attorney, and I ended up defending cases where there was a person who had died, typically hospital treatments, things of that sort. I did that for about 10 years, and that got really old really quickly. So I went to Russia for a year on a sabbatical and taught at a university there, and came back, had a friend. This is 2000, had a friend who was running a online company. He was the CEO of it. And, around 2000, if you think back that far, most people were still on dial-up, and it was very much the wild, wild west. And so from a legal perspective, it was interesting because, frankly, there just weren't, that many laws that applied. So it was interesting to see how it was all going to evolve. So I started doing that, and next thing I know, 18 years had passed, and I'm still doing it. So here I am.
And you seem very enthusiastic about it. And I guess the great thing about this area of law is that it's constantly changing. So for you, it's keeping up with what the changes mean and getting that knowledge out there.
Yeah, I think so. I think the best way to analogize is probably like doing SEO, search engine optimization for a site. SEO in 2002 was mostly about building as many links as you could, regardless of where they were coming from or the quality of the links. And, you shoot forward to 2018, and obviously that's not the best approach. You need relevant links and all these different things. It's become much more sophisticated. The same is true for the law. In 2001, you had judges who couldn't set up their own email. 2018, now you have judges who, are intimately familiar with the internet. They're obviously using it all day on their smartphones and what have you. So as that's occurred and as that process has moved along, you've seen a lot of developments on the legal side, some good, some bad. But it's definitely becoming more sophisticated. And unfortunately, it's also becoming more complex. You're seeing a lot of governments trying to mark their territory, if you will, online. And that's leading to a lot of uncertainty for businesses, unfortunately.
So I have to ask you, just yesterday, I was doing a Google alert for myself. And if you don't have one of those set up, you really, really should, because I'd done a whole bunch of pitches to some major newspapers. And I thought, I might just go and double check just in case I'm out there in the world and my Google alert hasn't picked it up. When I Googled myself, I found some icons that my graphic designer had made for one of my courses. And they were on one of those, I just call them spam sites. It was just a bunch of icons that they'd stolen from other people. Admittedly, they did refer back to my website, but I hadn't been notified. I hadn't been asked if they could use it. And they were actually encouraging people to download and use the icons for their site. And when I clicked the Contact Us button, it went to a 404 error page. So clearly this was just like a link farm or something along those lines to generate traffic and probably spam people. So tell me, what are my rights here when somebody blatantly steals my copyright?
Sure. Well, copyright is definitely the issue we're talking about. It's important to start off by saying, copyright is a country by country law. There is no international copyright law. So always check in your country, as to what the specific standards are. They differ quite a bit. I'm in the United States, so the biggest issue in the United States is really the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It's a federal law. It was issued and enacted in 1998. And the whole idea behind the DMCA was to create an environment where businesses could grow online without being dragged into court every time there was an infringement claim. So if you think about Facebook, it's kind of the classic example. Facebook is actually a really brilliant business model, and people don't really think it through a lot to understand why. Facebook doesn't really create much. They really don't do that much content creation because they don't need to, because people do it for them. When they open pages, most of the content you're seeing shared on Facebook is, content from friends and people who follow and what have you. And so, in the situation you were talking about and Facebook and everything else, the government was faced with the question of, well, we have this new thing called the internet. Most of us don't know how it works, but we could see it has potential as a commercial medium. What do we do, to protect these companies? And so the DMCA was basically enacted for that purpose. And what the DMCA says a couple different things, but the section we're interested in is Section 512. And it basically says that as long as you're a passive website and or a provider, and you're not the one who actually posted the content in question, you cannot be held liable for copyright infringement based on that content, based on the content uploaded by what we'll call user-generated content. And so it gives you the kind of the idea. Now, in exchange for that, because there's always a price, the site has to follow, or the company has to follow a particular procedure known as the DMCA takedown procedure. And part of that procedure is they have to remove the content. So if we go back to your situation and we're looking at it, and you had your icon stolen, well, how are you going to deal with that situation? Well, you could go try and file a copyright lawsuit, but as you probably already noticed, they have a 404 page up and everything else. They're probably located in somewhere like China, and your ability to ever track them down is, next to none, unless you want to, spend millions of dollars trying to do it, which doesn't make any sense. So under the DMCA, you would actually look at the site. Contacting the site's almost useless. Sometimes they'll throw a scare letter at them, a cease and desist, something of that sort. But typically, the better approach is to try to identify the host for the site. And you can do that by going in and looking at the URL and doing a who is search. And you can usually tell out, who the host is. And then you would just submit a DMCA takedown notice to them. They're free forms. They're on the web. It's just a form that you fill out. Most hosts will actually have their own form. And you submit that to them. And under the DMCA, the host has to take down that content. And they will send a notice to the person who has that site saying, basically, we received a copyright infringement complaint. You have a chance to file a counter notice. Now, they're never going to file a counter notice. And the reason they're never going to do that is because they know they're ripping you off.
Yeah.
What are they going to say? But the key thing to understand about this is an area the DMCA that confuses a lot of people. The host has to take down the content. It's not a choice. See, a lot of people, they submit complaints to Google and all these groups, and they think that these groups are looking at it and really evaluating it. And in 99% of the cases, that's not true. They have to take down the content. If they don't, they waive the immunity that the DMCA gives them.
So those host providers are kind of acting like the Facebook example you said. They're just the platform. And all the individual websites are user-generated content. So if the domain host wants to keep that immunity, they have to comply with the DMCA takedown law.
Right, they have to, and the method, the cure, if you will, for the person who posted it. So let's say somebody posted something legitimate. Let's say that you put out a product, they tried the product caught on fire, almost burned their child, and they write a review saying this product is horrible. And a lot of companies will serve DMCA takedown notices to try to get that review removed, even though it's inappropriate.
Sneaky.
Yeah, well, they'll do it because they'll say, we'll end up in court, and do you have money to defend it, and this, that, and the other thing. So in that situation, what would happen is the host would say, okay, we took down the content. However, you can file a counter notice. And at that point, because you have a legitimate reason for using it, which is criticism, a fair use defense, you would have the right to file a counter notice and say, hey, no, this is fair use. Now, a lot of your listeners are probably thinking, I've submitted complaints to Google and YouTube and even Facebook, and they look at them and they evaluate them. And that is true for really big companies that have tons of money. They do actually go look at the content and they'll make a judgment. And the reason for that, why it's different from smaller companies, is Google has so much money, they don't really care if they have immunity or not. If they waive the immunity, the biggest copyright claim you're going to get is $150,000 per violation, which is nothing to Google.
That's nothing to them.
Right, exactly.
That's my ad spend.
Well, exactly. That's, the Federal Trade Commission is the group that's in charge of basically policing deceptive marketing practices in the U.S. And they caught Google at one time that was actually, they had hacked into, I won't say hacked, allegedly hacked into Apple's Safari browser and were following people around and building behavioral, databases of these people, which is completely illegal. And the FTC fined them $22 million. It made a big deal about it. And $22 million is like a half hour of revenues, maybe not even that, for Google. I mean, it's just nothing. So you always have to remember, scale when we're talking about these things. So the DMCA, if you have a site and you allow users to post to it, you want to register for the compliance process with the DMCA, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if somebody has stolen your content, you want to go hunt for that host because those hosts will react and they will become your hammer. Because if you think about it, a host has thousands of clients, and so they're not going to, go down the drain because of one guy's paying $9 a month, to put up a ripoff site. But we have more sophisticated situations. So let's say you're in Australia, I'm in the U.S. We start looking at the site, and we see the host is also in China. So now what do we do? Because China's not going to react. Most of those people are not going to react. They're black hat hosts, all over the world. That they basically exist just to stick up their middle finger when people send copyright complaints.
They're like the Swiss banks.
They are in many ways, yes. Although Swiss banks is a fascinating legal situation that's just different from anything
it's
else.
like the theory of Swiss banks then.
The theory, definitely the theory. Yeah. So just a quick thing on the Swiss banks. The reason why Swiss banks don't cooperate with tax evasion claims from countries is tax evasion is not illegal in Switzerland.
There you go. You learn something new every day.
Yes. Switzerland doesn't have a strong federal government. They have what are basically, they're called cantons. They're basically like little states, and the states set their own rules. And in international law, most countries will not enforce a judgment or even act on a claim from another country if it's not illegal in their country. So that's why you get all that. But that's a whole different subject.
Anyway, we could have a whole different conversation about that.
A little cocktail, lounge news there. But so what do you do if your site, also the site in question is also being hosted in Russia or China or somewhere like that? The most important tactic at that point is to try to follow the money. So how are they making money? And if you can identify the affiliates or even who's doing the payment processing, you can go after that. I have a large client in the U.S. who is a very well-known personality, and he sells courses, and people rip off his courses all the time, and it's this ongoing battle to try to stop it. And we had a scenario recently where the course was listed on a site that was offshore. It was impossible to go after, but they accepted payment through PayPal. And so we approached PayPal, and after a couple of months of screaming and yelling, PayPal eventually, took down the payment processing. Well, if they can't make money off the content, obviously, that defeats the purpose. So following the money all the time. If they have affiliate links up or something like that, you can also contact those companies, and they will usually shut them down. So that's definitely another approach.
Wow, that's interesting. And I see that all the time. I know quite a few friends of mine I've seen on those. I don't even know how you end up finding them, but I remember I just emailed my friend Natalie Sisson about 6 months ago and said, I found your course on some spam website selling it for a fraction of the cost of what you do. So they're definitely out there, and people are going to be unscrupulous. People are always going to try and make an easy buck at the expense of everybody else. So you really need to be aware of what you're allowed to do legally, but also what your requirements are. So can we just quickly touch on, if you're using images on your social media or on your website, on your blog, how do you have to act there?
Sure. So the images, again, the issue is copyright. And you just need to really think about, okay, where am I getting this image from and what rights do I have? And there can be a lot of confusion. And again, right now we're talking about U.S. law. So in the U.S., let's take an image a photographer shot. Once they shoot that image and make it quote unquote available to the public, they own the copyright in it. And that's just the way it is. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Same thing with a graphic, same thing with anything like that. So once they have that, if you want to use that image, you have to have a reason, a real reason to do it, a real legal reason. And typically you can license it. You can go to, stock photo sites and things of that sort. Or you can contact the photographer directly and ask them for permission. And in some cases, people want something to go viral, and so they'll offer it up, and you'll see share buttons and things of that sort, and you can share it without changing it, and you're fine. The problem is, unfortunately, it's really easy, obviously, to copy an image online. It's just right-click, save, and, republish wherever you want. You can't do that unless you have some kind of fair use basis for doing that. We'll talk about fair use in just a second, but one of the common mistakes people make is they think, well, I can use an image from somewhere, and as long as I link back, to that source, then it's not copyright infringement. And under U.S. law, that's just wrong. It is copyright infringement. All you're doing is giving attribution. Attribution is a defense to plagiarism, not to copyright infringement.
Oh, that's interesting, because a lot of people on blogs will do like a roundup post, and they might take, 5 ways to take time out in your day, and they go and take the blogs from other people's websites and potentially use those images, and they think just linking back is okay, but you're saying it's actually not.
No, it's not only is it not, but it's actually kind of particularly damaging, because when you're determining damages in copyright infringement cases, one of the issues was the person who posted the image innocent or not? And if you've put a link back to the site that you took the image from, well, you're not innocent.
Really not innocent. And we're talking, I was going to say, when we're talking about the image, we also could be talking about the text as well.
Yes. So let's talk about roundup posts. So roundup posts, copyright is is frustrating for people. It's frustrating for lawyers. And the reason why is copyright law was established literally hundreds of years ago, well before the web came. So the applications that you see on the internet and the common techniques you see on the internet, didn't exist offline. You didn't have Roundup, books or something of that sort. It's just, a lot of these things didn't exist. So the application of copyright law to the web can sometimes be a real stretch. And, it's the putting the square piece into the round hole kind of a situation. One of the things about copyright is you cannot copyright facts. You cannot copyright an idea, and you can only copyright a creative work that is substantial. Meaning, what does substantial mean? Well, typically it means, more than a couple lines. And so when people do Roundup posts and they publish a couple lines and maybe the title from the article and then it's a link off to that article, the argument that they are making, even if they don't realize it, is I'm not copying enough of this that it matters.
Because let's be honest, this is how BuzzFeed stays in business.
Well, a lot of sites, Huffington Post,
yeah.
A lot of these groups. And so that's what's going on there. Now, there is another side to it, and this is very important for listeners to always keep in mind. And if you have a lawyer, feel free to smack them upside the head because a lot of lawyers don't do this. There's the practical aspect. If Forbes writes an article that's on the front page of their site and they have a link to your site, you probably don't want to be getting that link taken down. It has valuable SEO purposes. You're going to get a lot of traffic. I'll give you an example. I represent a couple of bands. Don't know why. Help some friends out. Like saying I know I represent a couple of bands. And one of the bands, the members, and we laugh about this, and it's pretty much public knowledge at this point, they will do concerts and people will film the concerts on their phones and then they'll publish them on YouTube. And they used to go ballistic. Take it down as copyright infringement, blah, blah, blah. I kept pointing out to them, these are your fans. We don't really want to be serving the fans with cease and desist letters. Now there's some legal aspects that you have to think about, but generally you want people to promote you. And if your fans are out there saying, hey, look at this video and this concert was great, you guys should all follow this band. We probably don't want to follow up that, with a letter from Law Office of Richard A. Chapo, cease and desist. That just doesn't really make a lot of sense, does it?
No.
So there's a practical side to all of this that you need to keep in mind. But yeah, so that's what's going on with those. And Roundup's really, most people, would be very happy to be in a Roundup just from a practical purpose. Link building can be a pain in the rear, as we all know. And so that's an easy way to get into it. So are you really going to complain at that point? No. But if somebody's got your, content scraped off of your site, on a cheesy blog somewhere, and they're using it to rip people off, well, at that point, probably you're going to be a little more angry.
Yes, for sure. And feel free, Forbes, if you'd like to take any of my articles. I'm going to give you permission out here as long as you link back to my website.
Well, exactly. But you'd be surprised how many calls I get.
Oh, gosh.
And it's just like, really?
We should all be so lucky.
I know, and it's like, God, kill to have that, get me in the LA Times website.
So I was reading on your website something about having an agent for the DMCA. So can you just, I wanted to ask you this question personally. So can you just explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So as part of the compliance process, you have a website, you have an app, you have something, and you allow users to interact with it, even if it's just comments. You want to comply with the DMCA. And the reason is the cost is a staggering $6. And for that $6, you're buying immunity from being sued for copyright infringement for anything any of your users post. So, do it. I mean, you can't find something that cheap ever. But part of the compliance process is that you have to select a DMCA agent. Now, if you think about Facebook, okay, well, if you wanted to serve a legal complaint on them, who are you going to serve it to? Mark Zuckerberg? No. The way it works for corporations, you select an agent. And the agent is published in the Secretary of State database, and lawyers know that, and they know how to find them. Well, it's the same idea with the copyright law with the DMCA. You have to designate a DMCA agent. They're listed with the Copyright Office in the United States. They have an online database. You also have to list the information online on your site and what's called a DMCA policy. And again, the cost is $6, so it's nothing to it. You can be your own agent, or if you have an attorney that you work with, the attorney will often do it for free. And if you need an agent, you want to have a third party do it. Yours truly owns a site called dmcaagentservice.com, and you can get an agent. The only reason you might want a third party agent is if you work at home. And the reason why that's a problem is under the Copyright Office regulations. You have to remember they've never run a business before, and so they don't think these things through.
I'm guessing you have to list your address?
your phone number, your email address, and your physical address. So you can't use a PO box or a service.
Yep.
So if you want, if you're worried about quote unquote a fan showing up on your front door, then getting your lawyer or an independent agent to act as, that agent, is definitely what you're going to do. Lawyers don't care. They have people coming in yelling all the time anyways. But if you have kids or something like that, if you're writing on controversial topics, it wasn't long ago we had Gamergate, and all these kinds of things, and people get all out of control about it. And some of those people, you read some of those comments and you probably don't want them showing up at your house. So you always have to understand that part of the process. There was a book online on Amazon called The DMCA Handbook. It was a tremendous book. It was written by an attorney in Arizona, explaining the DMCA process. And you could buy it and anybody could learn it and do it. I would encourage, the book unfortunately is out of print. So I'd encourage people to go around, just do a search for DMCA takedown process. You should see plenty of articles online. Learn how to do it yourself. I mean, I'm glad to do it for you, but I'm going to charge you. And all I'm going to do is basically hunt for hosts and things that you could do yourself. But if you can learn the process yourself, you can largely take control of the potential copyright infringement issues that you face. And then with the agent, it's just a question of, do you care if your information's out there or not?
True. Okay. Let's move on a little bit because, of course, I'm sitting here thinking I need to find the link to the takedown form. So I'm going to find that and I'll put it into the show notes. And, of course, we'll also link back to your DMCA agency as well for people who are like, yes, I need one of those. You did a really great blog on social media influencer followings. And I'll link to this one as well because I know a lot of retailers use influencers to build their brand, to get brand awareness, to build credibility and social proof. So tell us a little bit about the pitfalls you might have if you're using an influencer to build your brand.
Sure. Well, there's a couple aspects of it in the U.S. So the two of them, primarily, one is disclosures that you have to make under FTC requirements, and then the second one is control. Really, how do you control your followers? Things of that sort. It's difficult to explain in a catchphrase, but let's start with the FTC requirements. If you are a retailer and you're hiring an influencer, this is a hot button topic with the FTC. They consider it deceptive marketing if you do not have that influencer disclose that you're paying them or that you're giving them free swag or whatever it is that you're doing in exchange for them promoting your product. And so if you think about Instagram and the first three lines of, the post, they have to put something in there, a hashtag sponsored or hashtag ad or something of that sort. It needs to be apparent, that there's compensation being paid there. And the reason being that, they would just want people who are viewing it to know, that there's some money online, because obviously that affects credibility. I think we've all been to, various websites, let's say treadmill sites are kind of infamous for this. You go to the site, there's 85 treadmills listed. All of them have 5-star ratings. And it's apparent that whoever built the site probably has never been on a treadmill in their life. But, each treadmill links through to Amazon or some other site, where they're going to generate affiliate commissions. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But you just have to disclose. And so you have to put disclosures up there saying, basically, I'm earning money if you click this link and purchase. Now, most people cringe at that idea because they think about it from the wrong way. Instead of thinking of it as, this burden, present it to people as a positive. I just want to make sure, you understand, that this is a for-profit business and I make money on the following links. It doesn't affect which products I promote. And that kind of a thing, and make sure that's true, obviously, and use it as a positive. It can actually build your credibility, because I think we all know there's so many sites out there that don't do that and that are making money in funny ways that, most people are pretty cynical now when they cruise around the web. So that's the most important thing. FTC violation penalties, they can claim up to $41,000 now per violation. So you really don't want to go down that road. The second side of that is when you're building a following on social media, whether you're a retailer or an influencer or really anybody, the important thing to remember is the issue of control. So do you control those accounts? And you may think to yourself, yes, I do. And the answer is no, you don't. So if you build up 100,000 followers on Instagram, the company that controls those followers is Instagram. And if you do something that violates their terms, or you do something that forces them to act, they will close your account. And when they close that account, you are not getting it back.
Yeah, you have no recourse either.
You have almost no recourse at all. And, we were talking before the show started, I get calls on this a couple times a month. I know other attorneys in this field get calls all the time too. So how does any of this happen? Well, let's go back to the DMCA. So the DMCA has something in it called a repeat infringer requirement. And so when you think about the web, if somebody has taken your graphics and they posted them on a site somewhere, it's probably not the only site they posted them on. They may be on other, 10, 15, 20 other sites. So what happens is the copyright owners, you end up playing whack-a-mole, where you're going around, and you get them taken off of 10 sites, and suddenly they appear on 10 more sites. And so under the DMCA, they say if a site has knowledge, that a person has infringed, they have to set a policy, a reasonable policy, that if a certain number of infringements occur within a certain period of time, that person has to be terminated from the site and no longer be able to use the site. And the numbers are pretty low, like maybe 2 or 3 violations in a 2-year period. So let's say you're on Instagram and you have a competitor that you have a very strong rivalry with. What's to stop that competitor from claiming that you're committing copyright infringement, 3 or 4 times in a year? And if you don't counter notice those and get them taken away, if you just ignore them, suddenly you have 2 or 3 complaints against your Instagram account. Instagram is going to shut your account. And you just lost all of those followers. So the answer to that is really to try to, think about control. How can I survive a situation like that? So maybe moving people back to your website, to try to get them onto, an email list or something of that sort. It depends on the business model and what you're doing. But the point is to always think about that and think about, are these different things? Instagram obviously is very popular. One of the things most people don't realize about Instagram, and you wouldn't realize looking at Instagram, is that racy images are are a violation of the terms of use for Instagram. Now you go float around Instagram at the people who are modeling bathing suits and things like that, and I don't know where you draw the line on a racy image, but some of those are pretty damn racy.
Some of them are very racy.
Right.
My daughter is forever looking over my shoulder going, that lady hasn't got very much covered.
Right. Exactly. So, what's to stop, Instagram from one day, saying, okay, well, we're creating these guidelines and, suddenly poof, people disappear. So that's obviously another issue, that you need to keep in mind. The other thing that could come up, and we've seen it with YouTube lately, and if anybody is a YouTube influencer or uses YouTube to make money, they'll be painfully aware of this. In the last year, YouTube has been slicing their revenues that they pay out to people, they're publishing on YouTube. And in some cases, slicing them directly or damagingly and in significant percentages, and you have no recourse. You just have none. They have every right to do that. So what I try to tell my clients is if you're going to be, whether you're going to want to be an influencer or something of that sort, always try to get that data back to something that you control. Again, your email list, make sure you spread them across all the social media, platforms, whatever you can do so that if you lost one of those, you're not going to be devastated. And frankly, you see a lot of people, go through. Because if you do that, then, it makes a huge change in your world. I mean, you got to look at PewDiePie, the gamer on YouTube, has a fascination with saying the N-word every once in a while. Well, if YouTube's, just cut him off, his response is, well, I have all these other things going on. Well, yeah, but if YouTube cuts you off, you're not going to have those other things going on for long.
No. And where's your revenue coming from?
Right, exactly. Sponsorships and things of that sort. But, there are a lot of people who would love to sponsor Tom Brady. But if Tom Brady stops playing football, there's no reason to sponsor him.
He's not worth anything, no.
Right. If he's sitting on the couch all day eating nachos, that's just not really a good look for most of the sports companies. So, so it's one of those things. So I'm not in any way suggesting people shouldn't go out and try and build, following on the social media channels. You should, absolutely. The beautiful thing about the web is that as it evolves, it always comes up with these little niches that people would have never thought about before. And you should take full advantage of those and do everything you can to build a following. But just think about, okay, how do I convert this following not only into instant money, but how do I get control of them so that if, God forbid I lost this account, I'm not just wiped out. And if you, and you can do that by offering, free books. Yeah, it depends what you're doing. free meetings, free whatever on your site. If people come over and they, submit their email address or something like that, you can do that under U.S. law. Certainly, you can't do it under EU law anymore. But any of those kinds of tactics where you can move those people, into your control. So then again, Facebook disappeared or something like that. You're in business and you have a good position to continue on from.
Oh, and this is the point, guys, where I take out my big stick and I whack you when you tell me that newsletters aren't worth sending and email lists aren't worth creating. And I don't want to spend my $60 a month on MailChimp. But yeah, yes, you do. Richard's just given you an extremely good reason, other than all the reasons I would give you. But Richard's just given you a fantastic reason to go out and pay your bloody MailChimp monthly subscription and get those social media followers onto a database that you control.
Yeah, I think email's definitely changed. I won't even say that it's lost its value. It's just changed. If your idea of an email, drip campaign is to send, bizarre offers to your list every day, your list is worthless because all you're doing is annoying people. You need to give them some kind of a value. You need to give them free stuff. Send them an email once that has, a long article on, how to build a following on, whatever. And it doesn't pitch them anything. And people read those and they see its value, and there's nothing in there that, you're trying to sell them. You don't have to sell them on every email. And then they look at that and they say, wow, there's value here. And then when you send the next one that has a subtle, not in their face pitch, they're going to be more receptive to that. So go out and, Pat Flynn, people like that, read their email strategies. Because if you're just spamming your email list, it's not going to be worth anything.
No, but we just have to get them off the social media channels so that, like you said, you've got a good distribution so that if one of them goes pear-shaped, you can still access your people somewhere else.
Right. And the sites that have the biggest problems with this are Tumblr. If anybody's still using Tumblr, they close them all the time. Instagram will close them. YouTube will. Facebook's pretty lenient, but when they do decide to close it, forget it. You're never getting it back. So it is a problem on all the sites, and it will be on whatever, the next big thing is. So just make sure, you protect yourself as much as possible.
And just lastly, while we're talking about personal information, you intrigued me when you said that you should never, this is going to be a double negative, never promise not to sell or share or rent personal information because it could hurt your business. Can you just go a little bit deeper into that? Because, of course, I know whenever I do an opt-in, it always says down the bottom, we won't sell or share your information to a third party. So just give me a little bit more information on why that could hurt my business.
Right. Well, now would be the time to extol the negative virtues of free forms and everybody else does it statements. So if you have a website or an app or whatever your thing is that you're generating money off of and you control it, it's a business. So ask yourself, what is the value of that business? And unless you're doing something really, really creative, the value is typically your client list or your newsletter list. A dating site, Match.com, huge dating site, does really well, has a lot of value. 99.9% of its value are the people that are listed as, individuals looking for dates on that. The graphics, the color, the cool coding, all that stuff is worthless. When it comes to a sale, I can get that anywhere, but I can't get that member list. So if you've promised those members that you will not sell, share, or rent their information, and Mark Zuckerberg shows up one day in a slight haze from drinking too many margaritas and offers $300 million for your website, and he wants that database, you can't give it to him because you just promised everybody that you will not sell, share, or rent their information. And so the famous case is a dating site called True.com, and they were owned by a parent company that had financial problems. The parent company got dragged into bankruptcy, and so all the assets of the company get dragged in as well, and True.com was in the bankruptcy court. Smart little dating site called Plenty of Fish saw this and recognized, hey, we can buy their database. And so they came in and offered $700,000 to buy the database of all the members. And they were going to republish them on Plenty of Fish, and it would vastly expand their database, which is a big issue with dating sites, and everybody'd be happy. And the Attorney General of Texas objected to the sale. And he said to the court, hey, True.com promised not to sell, share, or rent member information. And that's exactly what this is. And the court agreed and terminated the sale.
So that's interesting because what if they would have sold the whole business? Do they then acquire the email list as well if they buy the business and not just the email list? I know there's a whole bunch of other implications like the debt and all that kind of stuff, but let's just say there was a simplified version of that. They bought the whole company for $1. Do they then own the mailing list?
I don't know of any case law on it. I would think that they do not. I think you'd have the same objection because it's an activity of that business. I mean, it's a good question. You do raise good points about the debt and all those other factors, but you would certainly get an objection. And I think it's probably going to depend on, how the court views the promise. But a privacy policy applies to the site regardless of who owns it. And so I would think that you would have to follow that. And that would mean the sale would be, terminated. Now, the way around all of this is to include a clause in your privacy policy that says, however, should we sell this site or our parent business, your data will be transferred to the purchaser. It's as simple as that.
And
the problem.
I was going to say, you're 100% right about the email list. Again, this is big stick coming out. You need an email list because what was it back in 2014? Facebook bought WhatsApp, the chat website, for nothing else other than the metadata on the people who are inside of the app, and they paid $19 billion. That's billion with a B. I just went and Googled it because I couldn't remember the exact number, but $19 billion for that data. Now, I would believe that the WhatsApp people didn't have this clause or they had that disclaimer in there if they did, because like you said, if somebody somewhere decides that what you have is valuable to them, you might want to cash in on this opportunity. So I know that once we get off this call, I'll be going to check my privacy policy because I'm not sure what's in it.
Right. Well, I think I think a lot of it, comes down to how big are you? I mean, obviously, if you have a large site that's being sold, I bet somebody did look at that because a lot of people objected to the sale to Facebook just because, the pure amount of personal information was being moved. So WhatsApp may have done that correctly, or they may have just not mentioned it. It could, who knows what it actually said. But I bet somebody looked at it. Obviously with smaller sites, it's kind of an issue. The problem is that if you have a sale, even if it's a smaller site and the other side has an attorney, that's one of the things they're going to look at. And the websites, the thing to understand about websites is the beauty of the internet is, now we have so much open source code and everything's so modular, WordPress and what have you, that, a site and its design really isn't very valuable.
No. Just
because you can get it anywhere. So the value is almost purely in the intellectual property, if you have a trademark or something of that, and it's a well-known name, or in, your metadata, your client data, however you want to define it.
Or your traffic, which is kind of the clients as well. Either way you look at it, whether they're on your mailing list or not, the traffic coming to your website, they're potential customers.
Right. And with traffic, though, again, you're looking at control. If it's SEO, who knows, Google comes up with some bizarre change to their algorithm and suddenly, your traffic gets killed. But if you're running Facebook funnels or something like that, then you have more, Facebook could do something, but realistically, you have a lot more stability in that market. How are you going to address all these things? The other thing that's coming along is in the EU, they're issuing a new privacy law that goes into effect in May. That is very anti-business.
Oh, is it the double opt-in thing?
Yes. Well, more than that. Yeah, the General Data Protection Regulation, the much hated GDPR. So the GDPR says basically, won't go into it, it's 99 articles long and many hundreds of pages, but it basically says this: unless you have a legal basis for collecting information from somebody, such as their name and credit card information when they purchase something from you, you have to get consent from them. And consent means that when you go to a site in the EU, starting in May, there's going to be a pop-up, and the pop-up is going to list granular explanations of what they're collecting information for. So we want to collect information to market to you. We want to collect information to send you administrative emails. We want to collect information so we can sell it to third parties who will market to you. Each one will have a check the box, and you as the consumer will have the right to check the box yes or no. And then that business, and that sounds great if you're a consumer, but if you're the business, you have to realize that that box, once you take that action, they then need to track you going forward, individually, each one of you, the whole way for the rest of however long they hold that information. And they have to have an audit trail there that they can show any of the 28 enforcement agencies in the EU, that they're doing this and that they're basically going through the consent. And you can be fined up to $24 million for failure. Now, obviously, those are scary numbers, but there will be substantial fines out there. The other aspects of it are, unlike in the U.S., you can no longer hold your list forever. You can only hold it for a set amount of time. Now, you get to set that amount of time. It has to be reasonable. So say, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. And then at that point, you have to send out emails to your list and get them to try to renew. And your old email list, the email list that you have right now, you may not be able to use it because the consent requirements, they go beyond double opt-in in the EU.
Yeah. So that that's a legal minefield, and I'm just thinking, I subscribe to a lot of American stores, and I know I've been on their websites for more than 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and I don't think I've ever been asked to come back and opt in again. So unless it's somewhere hidden in one of the emails that, because you open this email, you consent to us sending you more emails. I don't know how many people are complying with that one.
No, in America, it's not an American law. It's only EU.
Oh, it's only the EU. Okay.
Yeah, but the problem is the EU. So the EU has actually had a privacy law similar to this called a directive since 1995. The problem with the directive, well, I didn't consider it a problem. I considered it a great thing. I had one of those little strange loopholes that they did again, 95. Nobody really understands the web. So they said this directive applies to any business located in the EU. And not realizing that it doesn't really matter where the business is located.
It's the internet.
Right, exactly. If you're in Sydney, you're in California, you're in London, you can still market to all the same people. And so this new GDPR says if you're offering goods or services to the EU, it doesn't matter where you are. Are you offering goods and services? And then there's this vague sliding scale that will be litigated over for 20 years. And you have to go through this whole process. And it's okay for Facebook. They got the resources for it. But what about everybody that's small? And the GDPR makes no exceptions for the small guys. They just don't care. They're very anti-business. One of the worst regions to do business in the world. Not even just this, for anything. Just a terrible place to do business. But, it's going to rock the world. An email list and things of that sort. People are going to have to rethink monetization. How are they going to deal with those? So if you are looking at an EU market, if that's your target market for your business, you should be speaking with a lawyer in the EU now and trying to figure out how you're going to get through this mess.
I have to say, it is one of the places I don't market to, only for the reason that the time zone is so different that it's almost impossible for us to find great times to chat. Like if I'm working with clients, there's a window of 1 hour per day that works for both parties. So I just I keep my Facebook ad, my Google ad spend by just not marketing to Europe.
Well, it's a benefit. It's a definite benefit. I think that's what you're going to see as the web evolves, though. You're going to see economic, walls, if you will, because for a lot of U.S. clients, why would you go if 2% of your sales are in the EU? Well, do you want to spend $30,000 trying to comply with this stupid regulation, or do you just want to say, and block all traffic from the EU?
Yeah, definitely. Now, you have a fantastic download that we're going to link to, which is 9 legal tips for protecting your online business. So I'm going to make sure to link to that because you have given us so much information. We could talk for ages. But I do have a couple of questions to finish off with. First one is, what is your favorite store?
My favorite store?
Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be so sad. I have to admit, I am a Amazon slave.
Amazon comes up a lot.
Yes. Well, I live although I'm in San Diego, I live a little bit to the east in the mountains outside San Diego. And yes, there are actually mountains outside San Diego.
Yes, so my friend lives in, is it La Mesa?
Yeah.
At the bottom of the mountains.
Right. I'm at the top. So yeah, way out there. So I'm kind of in a remote area. So Amazon's nice because it's, there's just not a lot of shopping out here. So I think, sad to say, but I'm an Amazon slave.
And why do you love Amazon? What is it about Amazon that makes you go back again and again?
2-day shipping.
2-day shipping.
Yeah. Because, when you, when you're sick and you need something or whatever, I need that shipping right away. I hate ordering things and waiting 3 weeks for them to show up. But again, that's kind of where I am. There's no store just to pop down to and buy, some kind of cough drops or something.
That's interesting, actually, because what we can learn from that as independent retailers is fast shipping is super important to our customers. So if you have the opportunity to, whilst you may not be able to affect how fast your parcel is delivered, what you can change is how fast you get that parcel out. So if you are marketing to someone like Richard, and to be honest, there are a lot of people like Richard who fast shipping is super important to them, take that on board and look at your shipping processes and how can you turn around your orders a lot faster to get them out.
Absolutely.
Okay, Richard, thank you so much for being on the show. If people would like to maybe talk about you being their agent or find out some more information on this legal minefield that is the internet, where can we find you?
Sure. If you need a DMC agent, you can always go to dmcagentservice.com, very creatively named, and just use the contact form there and I'll get back to you. And if you have legal questions, you can reach me at my law firm website, which is SoCal, like Southern California, internetlawyer.com. Obviously, all these domains were purchased when keyword phrases were still key to getting ranked.
I was just thinking the DMCA agent, hello, the great SEO on that one.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Google downplays the keywords a bit these days, but I was king of the world for a couple of years there. But any of those sites, and just use the contact form, and I'll get back to you.
Fantastic. Again, thank you so much for all this information. It's been so much to take in, but also for me, great learning experience. So I reckon if I've learned something, you've completely blown the minds of our listeners.
Well, hopefully so. Thank you for having me on.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. You can find all of the show notes over at selenaknight.com. If you found something that you heard today particularly useful, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And of course, feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit by listening to it. Want more retail biz strategies? You can watch the Bringing Business to Retail TV show, where each week I'll answer a question or provide you with a simple, actionable retail biz strategy that you can implement in your business right away. If you have a question or a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Drop my team an email at podcast@selenaknight.com and I'll see you on the next episode. Have a great week.